Well, I said I was going to make a video about the Brendok coven, and here we are. So, what if you're going to write? I wouldn't actually write this specific coven personally. I would make up a new one. That way, you don't need to worry about trying to understand the bizarre plot holes related to them. At any rate, so I'm going to go over these and explain why I feel that the plot holes are an issue with actually using them, and try to put in ideas for alternative ways to handle this so that you don't have the same issues the TV show did. One, the this particular coven is, despite being a major plot point, relegated to flashbacks and thus not present in the present day section of the work. So it's basically relegated to the backstory of several characters. 6 that are actually alive in the present day at some point. Granted, 3 of those die, but, well, actually 4. But, yeah. So, the problem here, that is the biggest core issue, is that due to being relegated to a historical background detail, we never get to find out much about them. Like, it's mentioned that there's, I think, a total of 56 of them. Whether that includes May and Osha, I don't know. But, oh, also aside, the fact that the Jedi were able to count them the way they did really makes me question why the Jedi didn't notice them sooner. But whatever. So, the critical backstory of them is the exile plot. This quote is literally the only thing we know about the, mechanics and reasons for them being exiled. Also, the time period of their exile is, well, Star Wars doesn't really use the idea of the Force making you immortal in a physical sense. Powerful Force users have somewhat extended longevity, but not, drastically so. So it's possible that the members of the Coven are older to a certain extent than you would expect someone to look at that age. But yeah, the time period, we have nothing. Like, okay, nothing concrete anyways. The time period of the exile here is something where it's at least 8 years, because that's or 9 years, I suppose, would be a better one, because Osha and May are said to be 8 years old. So come to Brendok, set up their camp there, do whatever weird ritual to create Osha and May, and then Osha and May live for 8 years before the Jedi show up. That's about a 9-year timetable, which, reasonable. Doesn't tell us anything at all about the whole return of life to Brendok thing, because, yeah, that doesn't get explained either. See, and that's what I think would benefit you if you're making up your own coven, is that you don't need to worry about whether these background details are half explained, because you're making up your own. It doesn't matter what the previously established stuff is if you're making up your own coven. And quite frankly, the logic behind dark side force user covens, well, seemingly there's something that, while not considered acceptable or mainstream, are not actually all that hard to hide. Even if it's a relatively powerful coven, as long as it's not a Republic core world and someplace the Republic doesn't, you know, visit on a regular basis, they won't notice. It's really not that big of a deal as long as you're out of the way. I mean, because like that's actually something that's a plot device with the Dathomiri too. It's like it's a jungle planet that has no strategic or trade importance of any kind. Like, sure, it's a place where that's got a healthy ecosystem and someplace you could do a variety of things, but it's an unimportant backwater. So, having the Dathomiri witches living there until the Jedi ran into the Dathomiri witches was actually something that Jedi Council had no reason to care about. And that is actually something I find to be the most interesting thing about this one, is that it implies that the exile of this coven was relatively recent. Because again, it's that a large number of the members look quite young, like 20s or something, you know. And that gives you reason to question several things. Also, the annexation of the Brendok fortress, why it's referred to as an annexation is very, very curious. See, because typically an annexation would be like, for an example, a kingdom fights a war with a smaller kingdom and then decides to add the smaller kingdom to their territory. That would be an annexation. And, you know, it's like you're adding a region of territory to another region of territory. It's to make a single larger region of territory. What region of territory was the Brendok fortress being added to? That, yeah, again, if you're writing this from scratch, feel free to make up whatever you want. There's no answer here. There is literally nothing that says anything. Heck, you go to their official source document. No, nothing. Although this is a very nice picture. I still have to question why they have a double moon, though. Like, this is a double moon where the two individual moons are apparently tidally locked to each other. And also Brendok. I guess that's theoretically possible anyways. And also one of them seemingly has a ring around it. Although the hyperspace disaster thing might actually be the reason it has a ring. Yeah, that whole hyperspace disaster plot of explaining why Brendok used to not have life and now does again or something. Anyways, though, this is one of the planets on the outer regions of explored space where almost no one bothers going. Why people were mining here, what they were mining, has never been established. All we know is that what is referred to as the Brendok Fortress was a mining base. Why it is set up as a fortress is because this is Star Wars and we have pirates that do stuff in Star Wars. So, you know, you kind of want to have it be a defensible location since you don't have the ability to call for help from a, you know, Republic fleet. You're off on your own, doing your own thing outside Republic space. which again is an interesting plot point that gets both mentioned in the show and also ignored in the show. I know. One of those horribly inconsistent writing things that drives me nuts. They mention that Brendok is not a Republic world in the show. Which, of course, would explain why the witches were able to set up their base there, is because the Republic's not paying attention. It's not their space, so they don't care. Until someone noticed that the planet was no longer dead, which apparently took them over 10 years. So, yeah, the Republic was not paying much, if any, attention to the status of Brendok. The nature of the fortress and reason for it being there, we have a few vague hints, and that's it. All right, so what else has we got here? Rite of Ascension. This is a very important thing because it's the whole ritual. It's like, yes, you are now joining the coven. What this does is not clear because, one, it's like having May get marked with that spiral pattern on her forehead as part of the Rite of Ascension suggests that there's more than just a ceremonial purpose to it. It might actually be in some way required for their communal force magic, because the one thing that we know about the Brendok Coven and the way that they use the Force differently is that they have communal Force magic powers. Problem with these Force magic powers, of course, is that most of the members of the Coven are actually extremely weak at using the Force, and thus they need to have multiple members of the Coven work together to accomplish, well, most tasks that a actual powerful Jedi or Sith or whatever would be able to do single-handedly. Doesn't go into detail about that, though. Just kind of sort of tells us that, hey, people having multiple people working together does more stuff than just one person doing it single-handedly, which we kind of already knew. However, the Force magic that they're using here is set up in a way where that a group of people can lend their power to a single individual, and that one single individual's will is what is directing the power. What this has to do with the ritual is not explained, like most things in this show. But if you're doing this for your own purposes, yeah, throw in an explanation, because it implies that one exists. It gives hints as to what it might be, but it doesn't actually come out and say anything. Oh, that's another thing. I think it was this lady, but she was discussing the show and actually referred to the character she's playing as a Night Sister, which is interesting. Then again, she's a minor character who barely gets screen time, so whether or not she misspoke or whether or not what she was discussing is an older iteration of the script that doesn't actually reflect the filmed version of, or aired version of the script, I don't know. It's interesting food for thought, but doesn't go beyond that, honestly. Because, as many people have pointed out, these witches have many, many similarities to the Night Sisters, such as the fact that they refer to their leader as Mother, because, again, they seem to have been inspired by the Night Sisters, except they're not on Dathomir. Only one of them is a Zabrak, and they kind of don't use the same powers that the Night Sisters of Dathomir do. They have a completely different set of force powers that they've figured out how to do. Oh, also, this suggests that there's kind of like a dozen different organizations that use the title Mother. Anyways, moving on. So, Mother Anasaya is, of course, the leader of the Brendok coven. If you're going to make up your own, yeah. Well, also, she's dead in the present-day version of the Acolyte, so yeah, you can kind of would have issues with using her for that reason, too. Again, if you're making up your own coven, come up with your own idea for a coven leader. I mean, heck, you could have a Zabrak or a Hut as the leader of the coven. Yes, Huts can use the Force too. There's actually not as many Huts as people think. They tend to spread out and not live in large numbers anywhere. But there are actually cases where Huts have actually had the ability to wield the Force. So if you really wanted to, you could have a dark side cult that has a Hut as the leader. That's the other thing about this, and what makes the whole like witch thing different is that it's said in the show that there's multiple different ways of using the Force. There's the Jedi way and other things. I mean, like the Sith is one very specific way of using the Force that's not necessarily the only dark side way. Actually, we've seen from the Night Sisters that it really, really isn't the only way. Now, why exactly their powers were classified as dark side is not explained. However, they did demonstrate at least one ability that is definitely a dark side power, and that was that mind control magic thingy. Now, one thing that does seem to be an interesting side effect of the mind control magic thingy is that at one point, Indara uses some Jedi ability to break it, which causes some sort of weird psychic backlash that apparently kills all of the people that were involved, except for the person she's freeing from mind control. If you're going to write this on your for your own purposes, you could rework the power so that it's not so ridiculously over the top dangerous to its users. Also, it's not entirely clear if the witches actually knew that it was something that they could kill themselves with. Genuinely don't know. It's, again, poorly explained. And that's one of those things that I keep going with, is that having a clearly thought out methodology to things, even if you don't use it, having thought it out ahead of time before you start a TTRPG session means that if someone asks, you can just whip it out. And if you feel the need to whip it out because a plot point needs to be elaborated on, that makes it a heck of a lot quicker. And you don't need to fumble through coming up with something in the heat of the moment. At any rate, though, I think I'm done with this one. See you guys later.